So first, what is your reaction to the horrific attack on Jewish people that we saw on Bondi Beach?
It's utterly appalling and horrific, and my heart is with all of the victims and their loved ones, the Jewish community in Australia, the Jewish community here in the UK, because, as you say, this is being felt here sadly very closely, and we're only still recovering 2 months on from the horrific attack on our Jewish community here in Manchester. And it is totally unacceptable that the world's oldest hatred is sadly still permeating around the world and is being felt around the world, and we need to do more to stop it.
So I guess the question is on that, just very carefully at first, is security being upped for Jewish people at this time?
Yes.
What's happening?
Yes, it is. So the Prime Minister has spoken very closely with the Community Security Trust, who are the organisation who supports the Jewish community here in our country, to ensure that any Hanukkah events that are taking place over the next 7 nights will be secure, so that people in our country can celebrate this festival, which is meant about joy, love, resilience, light, so that they can celebrate with their loved ones and feel secure in doing so. It's a sad indictment that is the situation, Sophie, that is where we are. But yes, security is being stepped up, and the Jewish community have all of our support, and we stand with them.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? You say that it's a sad indictment that this is necessary, and I think most people would agree with that. We can kind of increase the security, we can talk about gun laws, but actually we need to talk about the motive as well. And, it kind of shames us all that Jewish people need security to worship, to celebrate. Do you accept there is rising anti-Semitism in the UK?
Yes, sadly, the figures show that. We know from organisations like the Community Security Trust, the Anti-Semitism Policy Trust, who are monitoring the levels of anti-Semitism, that it is rising, not just here in the UK, but around the world, and that is sadly what we're seeing. And I would urge everyone to think very carefully about their actions. This is going to take all of us in order to tackle, to be mindful of our actions and our behaviour. But I would just urge people to think about their neighbours, think about the Jewish community and how they need our love, support more than ever right now.
I guess, the question as well is, does the government need to do more? Do you need to take a tougher line? Because, chants like from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, globalise the Intifada, you hear this stuff. If you go to certain music concerts, if you go to certain protests, you will hear that.
And I want to be very, very clear that chants like that, any chants that are designed to intimidate, call for violence, call for the murder of Jews, are totally unacceptable. And the government has introduced new legislation in order to protect religious places of worship, because anyone who is seeking to protest outside of those venues needs to be very mindful of what they're doing. And I will defend the right to protest. The government will. It is a fundamental right of democracy. And there is a lot of people who are feeling very, very hurt about the actions of certain governments around the world right now, and they have a fundamental right to protest. What they do not have is a right to intimidate British citizens or call for violence in our streets, because sadly we have seen the consequences of what happens when that is done.
You mentioned the attack in Manchester that we saw in the UK, and I just want to read the words of the British-born rabbi who was murdered in Australia. And this was directed to the Australian Prime Minister, but I think some would argue that it could also be applied here. He said to Albanese, "I say this with urgency, stop fueling terrorism by legitimising those who spread hate. Listen to the voices of those who understand it firsthand." And he said that Manchester should be a wake-up call. I mean, does this government need to get a grip on anti-Semitism?
We all need to get a grip on anti-Semitism. I will be in Manchester later today, standing with the Jewish community there, with Rabbi Walker and his congregation, celebrating the second night of Hanukkah, standing with survivors of that terror attack later today. We all need to do more here.
Does this government need to do more?
As the Victims Minister, it is my job to listen to the voices of victims and to figure out how best we can support them.
Does this government need to do more?
We all need to do more.
But I'm asking specifically because, sometimes I find this with politicians. You say everyone needs to do this, we all need to... Does this government need to do more to tackle anti-Semitism?
Yes, and we are. We are going further, whether that's with legislation, whether that's with financial support for the Jewish community, whether that's with introducing, as I've said, new offences of protesting outside religious places of worship to protect those who are just seeking to celebrate their faith. There is more that we can all do, and we are going further.
I just want to talk as well about the case of Jimmy Lai. 78 years old, he's a businessman, he's a key figure in those pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong, critic of the Chinese government, and he's been found guilty of colluding with foreign forces. I mean, this guy's a British citizen. What's the government's response?
Well, I fully support the statement that the Foreign Secretary has made around condemning this politically motivated conviction of a 78-year-old man who was exercising his freedom of speech. The government will always stand for freedom of speech. We will stand for supporting British nationals, and we urge him to be released immediately.
I guess, the question is this muscular enough, right? This guy spent 1,800 days in solitary confinement. After he won the general election, 3 months after, Keir Starmer said securing his release was a priority for his government. It doesn't feel like a priority.
Well, the Prime Minister raised this directly with Xi Jinping when he met with him. We have raised this at every opportunity, whether that's been the Foreign Secretary or the Prime Minister, calling for his release, and the Prime Minister will continue to do so. As I've said, I echo the words of the Foreign Secretary, condemning this in the strongest possible terms and urging for Jimmy Lai to be released.
You're here to talk about domestic abuse. Obviously a very, very important story. What is the announcement today?
So we're investing a further £19 million on top of the £480 million we've already provided to support victims fleeing domestic abuse so that they can have safe refuge space. Because, Sophie, as the vast majority of us are gearing up to celebrate Christmas, sadly for thousands and thousands of people in our country, home isn't the safest place to be at Christmas. And 1 in 10 people are made homeless because of domestic abuse, and they need our support to rebuild and recover their lives. And this government is backing up the rhetoric with financial support as well as new legislation in order to meet that ambitious target of halving violence against women and girls.
One of the things I find kind of depressing about these stories is that if domestic abuse happens, it's the victim, the mum, and the kids who have to leave their home.
Yeah.
So the kids have to,
pick up all their toys, all of their life.
All their toys, or not even get a chance to do that. They have to travel to school. They're away from their friends and community.
And this
shouldn't
funding,
it be the guy who did it who has to leave?
Yes, and in some cases that is exactly right. In some cases it wouldn't be safe to do that, and which is why we're funding this new money. But this new money will also go towards ensuring that those women and children, or whoever the victim is of domestic abuse, are able to stay in their own home. So this money will also go to fund security measures so that they are able to stay in their home and feel safe in that place. But you're right, we need to start reframing this and going after the perpetrators. The Home Secretary yesterday was announcing a new package of measures to tackle perpetrators of violence against women and girls directly. Our Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, which we'll be publishing imminently, has prevention at its core in order to going after those perpetrators to prevent this from happening in the first place, because this cannot just happen in a vacuum. This has to be going after the perpetrators, preventing it from happening in the first place, and then supporting victims and survivors to rebuild their lives.